Recording again. Brilliant. Thanks, Nathan. Okay. Hopefully we're feeling refueled after lunch. Ready for more. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is fine. So we are going on to item number 8 now. So I will invite Gareth to speak to this item. This is our Q1 whistleblowing standards report for 2024-25. So over to you, Gareth.
Thank you very much. So covers the period 1st of April to the 30th of June, has progressed through our governance routes, including the Area Partnership Forum Staff Governance Committee. The key points to highlight from this are still relatively small number of cases coming through in each quarter. One new case was raised, one new concern raised, but not progressed under the standards, and one monitoring referral was closed. 4 cases remained open at the stage of writing the initial report and were under investigation. And 3 out of those 4 have now concluded in terms of the investigations, and 1 outstanding. So progress has been made since the report was written. I just wanted to note, reading the paper, there was an interesting discussion at Staff Governance Committee in relation to the wording used in the report around issues that are well known to the board and the public interest test, which was referred to earlier in the committee, in the board meeting under the committee update. I've put in an additional paragraph for board members to expand on that following the committee. I think to clarify that it was not in relation to whether concerns would be in the public interest. It was more in relation to the resources that might be directed towards an investigation, and discussing that with the whistleblowers. So give assurance that we are still focused on in understanding concerns and where necessary investigating them. So in both those cases, we agreed a process and a way forwards which would avoided necessarily going into a complex investigation where a lot of that detail was already available through other reviews that have been done. So that was the point I just wanted to highlight today, to provide that clarity around the public interest element, and whether that's in interest based on investigation resources. Other than that, I'm going to take the paper as read and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I picked that up with interest actually around that wording. And I absolutely take the points that came through in the paper and in the minute of staff governance around how we communicate that. I've got a couple of questions, but happy to open up to others. Maybe coming with mine first. I think I've probably asked this before, but I guess it's just helpful to remind ourselves. I think the bit for me is that balance between, I know under the whistleblowing standards, there are very specific, mechanisms and things that we have to do under the whistleblowing standards, and that we have to demonstrate how we're adhering to those processes, I guess. But I'm always mindful of what's the more important thing that sits behind it? What is the kind of the learning and the bit like that. So I just wanted to ask, when we have potential whistleblowing cases or whistleblowing cases where we can't, I suppose, finish the process because we maybe have lost contact with the original person who's raised it, or they no longer wish to pursue it through that process, just what is there for us? What do we do in the background to make sure that we're still benefiting from any learning or kind of investigation that might be there, taking into account that somebody who raises a whistleblowing concern might withdraw for a number of different reasons, but that doesn't mean that the thing that they've raised isn't still worthy of investigation. So I just wonder kind of what, if anything, we have that sits around the formal whistleblowing process where we think there's learning or investigation that needs to take place.
Interesting question. So I suppose in relation to the whistleblowing, ones that are formally under the whistleblower standards. I'm not aware of any where we've had a withdrawal through the process. So we've concluded. I'm happy to be corrected by colleagues here before me, starting last year. We did have in the report, it refers to a monitored referral that was discontinued. The the circumstances of each, that's the only one where we've discontinued it, and the circumstances in relation to that one would mean it wouldn't be really possible to investigate it any further without having contact with the individual. So we do have to bear in mind under standards. I suppose the similarity would be where we have an unnamed concern or an anonymous concern, where we might be there may be issues that are raised that would be concerning if they are indeed true and valid, but without being able to contact an individual, it's very difficult to investigate in any circumstance, let alone the standards. We're not required to under the standards in that circumstance, but it's a similar scenario where we might choose to investigate as far as we can to provide some assurance, but there's no definitive answer in the standards as to what you should or shouldn't do. It just refers to as best practice. So it's, again, we've got one which wasn't necessarily going to discuss today particularly, but we do have an example of an unnamed concern that's been raised where the individual doesn't want it's coming as an anonymous email. Effectively, we can't contact them. They don't wish to progress it under the standards. So we are doing a little bit of belt and braces of just investigating what we can in the concerns based on what we've got available within the organisation.
Okay.
So we're going to record that. So we've got some degree of paper trail around it.
Okay, well, no, that answers my question perfectly, because I suppose also thinking about the fact that it is, of course, Speak Up Week next week, and recognizing there's a lot of different ways that people can do that. And I suppose I was just looking for some reassurance that even if somebody has selected, I'm gonna say the incorrect route, but that's because I can't think of a better word right now. They've maybe selected the whistleblowing route to raise a concern, and they maybe don't meet the very specific criteria that the whistleblowing standards kind of wrap around that. In the spirit of that kind of broader Speak Up initiative, I would want to make sure that we had confidence that those concerns would still be looked into, even if it didn't kind of happen to match up perfectly with the whistleblowing processes. Okay.
I think for the purposes of the minute of the board, I think the wider range of routes that we have available, including our Guardian service, are available there, and we have a commitment when certainly I do when I meet with and so does our whistleblowing non-exec champion, to look at directing and signposting people to alternatives. So it's about a conversation. So I think in that context, the speaking up part of it's very important. Whistleblowing standards is only one part of that potential way of investigating a concern. So the Guardian service is a significant benefit to us as well, in terms of people coming forward with concerns and discussing them, and the vast majority of them are resolved to the extent that people are content with the response they've got, or they go into other processes. So there's I would say assurance back to the board. There's multiple ways of raising concerns. We've got then different potential actions we take as a board, depending on circumstances of the concern.
Okay, now that's helpful. Thank you. Sorry, I just thought of another question I wanted to ask. The bit about complying with the timescales, and I recognise that the investigations have the potential to be really complex, and that is obviously going to impact on the timescales. I am making a bit of an assumption that I want to check with you that is something we see replicated in other boards. We're not kind of outlying in that respect.
Good question. I would have to check, and I can certainly look to see the reporting. I think is available. I'll look at it in terms of what the other published reports are, but it will probably be fairly binary in terms of those that are met within the timescales and those that are not for other boards. It's not a question I've asked of other boards. So
Okay. Oh, that's fine, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? I've got Alex, please.
Just a follow-up from that, and it's on the Guardian service. I know that they provide our confidential contact service, and that's fine. Are they used by other boards as well, or are we the only one that's using them?
The only board in Scotland that uses the Guardians. Well, obviously boards just exist in Scotland, but yes, the only board in Scotland.
Okay, I would have thought that other boards that are having issues with bullying, etc., may have used us as a learning tool, but perhaps I'm wrong. Thank you.
Some, I suppose, to be fair to other boards, some have chosen to take a slightly different route to it. So we have a contracted service provided by the Guardian service, and it's a resourced confidential contacts. There are some models which are based on confidential contacts that are, I suppose, similar in concept to the kind of staff side role, where they have time allocated to be able to perform the role, and they have a distributed kind of confidential contacts, but it's as part of their day-to-day. You have to fit it alongside their other duties in most boards. So that's just to be fair. It's not to say boards aren't considering a confidential contacts. It's just we've done it. We're unique in the way we've done it.
Gareth. Okay, any other questions or comments on the Q1 whistleblowing report? No? Okay, so we were being asked to take moderate assurance based on the content and format of that report that demonstrates compliance with our reporting requirements under the standards, and note the challenges with the timescales due to the complexity of cases and investigations. We're happy with that. Great. Okay, Gareth, still you. We're on to item number 9. So this is the Health and Care Staffing Act Q1 report.
Thank you very much. So just this is our first quarterly report submitted through both Staff Governance Committee and Clinical Governance Committee, noting the crossover in and the broad breadth of the legislation. There's a lot of information in this report, so we're seeking feedback through this initial Q1 report, both from the committees but also from the board, on whether this is the right level of information, too much, too little. Any observations would be helpful from the board in that context. The background information around the duties that we are need to demonstrate compliance with is provided in the report, and then we've got a summary of how we're progressing the work associated with strengthening of our overall processes and procedures that enable us, if you like, to demonstrate compliance. So it is challenging to, I suppose, land on an assurance level for this, noting that the Health and Care Staffing Act was trailed in its pre-implementation phase as not a big bang, but a gradual improvement journey that boards would go on. Given that part of the challenge is to have the robust systems and processes associated with the duties across the whole system, whole organisation. So one part of it is demonstrating that we know how strong the spread and the depth of those controls is, and therefore where the gaps are that we need to address and how we work forward. So that's very much based on a self-assessment process and providing assurance and our knowledge of the system. So that's one aspect of it, and the second aspect of it is what we're doing to strengthen and what's our program of work. So we have settled on a moderate assurance on the basis that we have a fairly strong range of evidence to demonstrate the breadth of work across the organisation, both in terms of being able to demonstrate compliance, but also in terms of strengthening it. I won't labour the point too much because it's all in the paper in terms of then interpretation for board members, and I'm more than happy to take questions. I think it's more important to allocate space for questions for this particular report.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'll open up for questions, comments, and just picking up the point you made earlier, Gareth. This is a new thing for us to assimilate and scrutinise. So happy if people want to share reflections on how much this report format helps us to do that. So let's just have a look. I'll just while colleagues formulate their thinking. I suppose what really struck me, Gareth, is just the sheer volume that's in this. There's a lot in this, and which is great. But in terms of kind of being able to assess that and process it, there's quite a lot there. And I'd be interested as well, as probably not right now, but as things move forward, to look at how other boards are reporting against it, and if there's a sort of a move to any kind of, so you don't want to over standardize things, but if there is something that we can pick up from colleagues across the country. But I will pick up, we've got a few questions waiting in the wings, so I will come to Jerry first, please.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Gareth. I mean, the report was tremendously fulsome in information. I think, and actually, I enjoyed reading it, and it gave a scale of actually the breadth and the depth of the work that's ongoing. I suppose the question that I was troubled with is in terms of and this is in the context of this is report number 1, and we don't know yet, so it's probably more a comment rather than expecting an immediate answer. It's how do we take assurance from what is the presentation of lots and lots of information? The assurance will probably come, I think, as you've said, as we make our journey down that improvement route, and understand actually we've identified gaps or areas where we need to do work, and this is what we've done, and this is how we can demonstrate the improvement journey down there. So I'm content actually today to take the moderate assurance based on the wealth of information that we've been presented to. I do have a specific point, and it's going to be apologies to everyone. This is a bit of the pedant in me here is about to come out. What was missing from the report for me was actually, I didn't actually pick up, and apologies if I've missed it, just point me to it if I've missed it, and I will be quiet. I don't actually get an assurance statement or something from the medical director or the nurse director, which I think is the requirement, because this should actually be a report from I think the board level clinicians is what they're described as, and it's not actually contained anywhere in it. That actually, yes, I am content subject to, or I'm not content, etc., etc. So I think that's to me is a gap in it, and apologies for picking that up. But the report to me, I think, is evidenced by all the stuff about e-rostering, demonstrated the wealth of work that's going on there, and I think what it clearly demonstrates is we've got a lot of work to do. We've got lots of systems and processes that were perhaps more well defined in the nursing and midwifery space than they are in other spaces, I think, and we need to get to that. So, but the definite bit about who is providing the assurance on what, I think, is something that needs to be addressed. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jerry. No, that's a really helpful perspective. I don't know, Gareth, if you want to pick that up just now, or I can take other questions and we can.
Yeah, I'll pick that up. So just on your point around the other boards reporting, what I didn't know is there is no standard template for this, but we are basing it on the template that was trialed through the pre-implementation phase, which is a precursor to the annual report template. So so that level of detail is I suppose similar across the system. So up until the point of implementation, everybody was using the same template. I don't know then whether they've pasted it down or summarized it down for board purposes. So we can certainly go and have a look at other board reports and see what's out there. Second point, I think, Jerry, good spot, and certainly Louise and Boyd were part of the process and sharing that with them, so they definitely have been involved in that. So I suppose probably more formally noting it. I suppose my slight kind of devil's advocate piece would be that the legislation as it was written in that context was very specific at the time around medical and nurse director roles, but then it extended into social care and other spaces. So we do need to provide that assurance, but I suppose the element is this is all staff to some extent. So we just need to be thoughtful about that as well. So, but we do need to meet the requirements. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And absolutely, this is new reporting, so I'm sure it'll be very iterative. Alex, I'll bring you in next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Gareth, a bit like Jerry, it's the pedant in me. I can't help myself. Appendix 5, the assurance level is moderate throughout. Now, looking at it and looking at the table, what I suspect you would expect to see is that some might be moderate, some might be limited, some might be substantial, but they would be different. If they're all going to be moderate, then all you need to do right at the start is say assurance level moderate and take it out of the table. I don't know which way it's supposed to work, but as it says in there, everything's moderate because the whole thing's amber. And I don't think that's how I would expect that's not how it was designed to be. Unfortunately, when you do use it, as I think you will be required to do, which is to actually say what the assurance level is for each of those duties, you then get to the point of, well, what do you do if you've got 1 substantial, 3 moderates and 4 limiteds? How do you deal with that overall? But that's for the next quarter, I'm guessing.
No, fair observation. I think we've collectively struggled with the reporting in that sense. So I think you're right to probably has similarities to the conversation we had earlier about the IPQR in terms of, if you think about the scope of this act, it covers every single part of our organisation and every service. So how you make a determination on each of the duties is probably the thing that bothers me the most around the act and this reporting against it. It's akin to does a tree make a noise when it falls over in the forest if no one's there? It's that's kind of the element of we know what we know, and particularly if you look at the systems and processes, particularly around safe care, until we've rolled that out and we have it across the organisation, we're having to look at, you'd have to be based on paper-based processes, so we can be assured that there are regular activities to look at staffing in every single service area. And I think it is part and parcel of how people work and think on a daily basis, has been for the whole of my career, certainly, in terms of working in healthcare and moving people around, moving resources around. The systems will help us be able to gather that evidence on a regular basis. So it is a challenge, but I take your point. It's something we probably, and the final point I want to make is this was actually transition period. So when we had our last report from the Scottish Government before it handed over to Responsibility for Healthcare Improvement Scotland, we had actually proposed potentially putting it as limited in areas, and they actually advised us, said actually you're probably doing better than you think you are. So it's a little bit of a who's providing some of that objectivity outside the board to say we actually think you're being too hard on yourself, or no, you need to focus on this, which I suppose I'm thoughtful about saying it at a board, but we are now working with Healthcare Improvement Scotland in this space, so the responsibilities have transitioned to them now, and we are being advised at the moment we won't get feedback from them on our reports that we submit. So that's certainly something I've raised at the HRD's group. That doesn't seem overly helpful to boards, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
Thanks, Gareth. And just before I bring Muriel in, I think it would be interesting to take that offline and kind of monitor that as that develops, because yeah, it's interesting, and we need to make sure that what we're getting helps us to do our job, so we can have a look at that offline and think about how we want to take that forward. Okay, Muriel, sorry, you've been waiting patiently. I'll bring you in, please.
Apology if I was using the wrong mouse there. I've got 2 screens going. Thank you. It's a really interesting report. And as you would expect from me, that sections 121J, K and L, it's the tool run. Now, I see this as a continued risk, and it's been ongoing for many, many years, where we have a manual paper-based system, and we've got staff that can't access the IT side of things, the two organisations, two authorities, that they don't speak to each other. And I'm just hoping that this can be deemed a priority and a fix can be coming down the line sooner rather than later, because it's difficult for the staff. It's a common complaint across both organisations, and I perceive it as a risk, but I could be wrong.
I think on that particular issue, there is, I think we have to accept some of the risks that we won't be able to mitigate, and that is thoughtful about the systems are separate by the nature of having two different employers. So SSTS is the system that drives the common staff and methodology tools. So I'm not going to say that we can solve that problem. We're going to just have to support the teams as best we can in that space to do the work that they can to demonstrate that. So I note the point. I think it's just think we need to say that we can't necessarily solve it easily.
Thanks, Gareth. Okay. Right, so brand new, lots more to come, lots of very good questions. I think we need to stay close to this one as it evolves. But of course, this will be coming through our staff governance committee for more detailed assurance as we go through. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. We were being asked to review and scrutinise the content of the report and take moderate assurance. And of course, Gareth will take our comments and feedback away, and we'll keep developing this as we move forward. Was everybody happy with that? Great. Okie dokie. So next, item number 10, I'll invite Boyd to speak to this item. So this is our corporate risk register. So over to you, Boyd.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, colleagues. Just rejoined the meeting as I had to do something. So risk paper is presented as usual at our 2-monthly interval, and it is very much in the same format. We have 1 or 2 risk adjustments that will be noted in the paper, and particularly in our clinical governance, the risk related to COVID is under consideration of changing, as it's considered now that it constitutes less of a risk at board or strategic level than it did several years ago. I'll look to other executives to support if there are any specific questions on any elements of the paper for this board meeting, Chair.
Thanks, Boyd. Any questions or comments for Boyd on the corporate risk register? Not seeing any hands up. I suppose I wanted to ask a question, and it's maybe not one that we pick up just now. It's maybe something that we take offline. And I think we've sort of been bouncing it around for a while, but it's one I don't want to let go of. Is obviously we did that really good piece of work around our risk appetite that you led us through, Boyd, when we did that development session. And I suppose there's a slight look to the future around how we might use that in the presentation and discussion around our risk register a little bit more, because I thought that that was a really helpful piece of work that we did back then, and I suppose it just how do we bring it to life through the presentation of the risks as they stand.
Yes, it's difficult to do it directly and demonstrably, and the one wisdom for today's board would be, from what I've read and understood from those more expert than me, risk appetite is particularly useful where you're looking at transformation or development and change and moving forward. So a large part of the risks that are held operationally, so up into the level 2 as well as level 3, risks will not be about transformation. They're about ensuring safe services, will be a significant part. So it's probably one for us to revisit and to consider in a session outside the board. But certainly if there's a way to bring the risk appetite to life or demonstrate where it has been helpful, that is something that we would, certainly the executive team would be very keen to be able to do, and we'll give that some thought as we look at some of these high-level pieces of work that do involve change or transformation, where you need to have a risk appetite set a certain way to allow change to occur.
Absolutely. Okay, right. Well, I'm happy we can take that offline and have a think about how we want to do that going forward. Alex, I'll bring you in, please.
Thanks, Sarah. It's something I just noticed, Boyd. When we discussed it at FRP about 712, which was the fire compartmentalisation and the fact that Richard's written to the fire service to remove it or to get agreement to de-escalate it, rather. When you read the risk and combine that, what it sounds like is because we've got no money, we're asking for this. Now, that's not what it is, but that's how it reads. Because when you look at the risk narrative, work to improve the compartmentalisation within Raigmore Hospital and carried out to fit sprinklers and improve fire compartmentation. As from next year, no identified source of funding is available to complete this work. So when you read that and then you read, and we're asking it to be de-escalated, you can see where the link to finance could be read. So I don't know, Boyd, maybe it's something that either yourself, Richard, or somebody needs to think about how we can to break that link, because I'm assuming that's not a real link.
I can see Richard has got his hand up, so I'll bring you in, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. The risk is going to be rewritten, Alex. Fiona and I were actually going to meet with the fire officers and the head of building standards this week, but they cancelled the meeting. They had other priorities. So we're going to rewrite that risk. We've made a financial commitment for and put a programme in place that the fire service have accepted. So it should have been rewritten for this meeting, but unfortunately our meeting with the chief fire officer was cancelled before this. So I'll take that on board and it'll be rewritten for the next one.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we are being asked to take substantial assurance that the board is complying with legislation, policy and board objectives and agree to downgrade risk 715. Is everybody happy to go ahead with that? Lovely. Okay, good. I'm seeing thumbs up. That's great. Okay, so that takes us on to item number 11, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm just going to check. I think we have everybody here for it, which is excellent. So item number 11, this is our British Sign Language Plan, and I would just like to welcome Verity Giles, who is with us today, and Verity is going to sign for this item. And I'm going to hand over to Tim. I think you're going to introduce it.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Chair. And it's mainly simply to introduce the two people who've been far more engaged in this than I have. So that's Susan Burse and particularly Naomi Watson to go through the and present the paper this afternoon.
As Tim said, I'm Naomi Watson. I'm a health improvement advisor in health improvement team, obviously within NHS Scotland. So before I get into the main bulk of this, I just wanted to ask people to take a few seconds just to think about a situation where you maybe have been on holiday abroad and you're unable to speak or understand the language. So you might pick up the odd word from conversations, you might pick up a little bit more from things that are written down, but having been in that position quite recently, I know that I certainly felt very out of my depth, very confused by what was going on. And I have to be honest, quite isolated. I think not being able to communicate with people really in an easy way can be very difficult. So that is the situation for many deaf and deafblind BSL users. They will have been born deaf or they'll have lost their hearing at a very young age. Therefore, navigating the hearing world, where English may be their second or even their third language, can feel like that situation that we may have been in. Only for us, that may be a few weeks a year if we're on holiday. For someone who is deaf or deafblind, this will be their experience all the time. So if we then put ourselves in the context of trying to navigate healthcare, you know, for someone who has had to do that, being able to hear and being able to speak English and being reasonably health literate, I know how difficult that can be. So research has shown that whilst deaf people may display similar health behaviours to the general population, their health outcomes are an awful lot poorer. So for an example, things that we've experienced in NHS Highland, someone will turn up to an appointment only to find out that no interpreter has been booked. They may have a family member with them, and that family member is asked to interpret, which can be really challenging because that's not their role. They're there to support the individual, and it also denies the deaf person the right to privacy and also to autonomy. They also encounter on a very regular basis a lack of accessible information. We have seen lots of cases where people haven't understood their health condition, which could be very complex, or they maybe haven't understood the dosage of medication, so haven't taken it, or have taken it at the wrong time, or have taken the wrong combination, leading to, you know, serious complexities. So many people within the deaf community do not view being deaf as having a disability. It's just a different ability, and they celebrate a vibrant, rich culture and language. So in 2015, as you'll know from hopefully having read the report I wrote, that Scotland became the first part of the UK to afford British Sign Language legal protection. And as part of that, each public body now has to produce a 6-year plan setting out how we will promote and encourage the use of BSL and also deliver BSL accessible services. So we're now into the second plan, spanning 2024 to 2030. But it's good to reflect on what we've achieved so far in the previous plan. So just to summarise very quickly, a huge achievement was the development of deaf awareness e-learning modules. They were developed by NHS Highland Education and Learning Services, which is part of NHS Highland. And that training has now been endorsed by the Scottish Government and is delivered via tourists and is available across Scotland. And it's mandatory for all social care staff in NHS Highland. We also have a very popular BSL programme. For anybody who's tried to book onto that, there's a very long waiting list that's provided in-house, and that is comprised of blocks of 10 weeks of sign language classes which are run throughout the year. And if anybody has wanted to do that and go through to the assessment, because it is a qualification, there have been quite a few members of staff who have done that, and the pass rate's 100%, so the quality of the teaching is exceptional. We've also created a section on the NHS Highland website where all of the information available in British Sign Language is now located. So an awful lot of videos or links to other videos, for example, on NHS Inform's website. So to get to this point, we've gone through a period of consultation and engagement with a lot of local BSL users from within the deaf community, as well as their family members, carers, and also people with a shared interest. And we've had a lot of support from the British Deaf Association, who helped to facilitate 2 events in Inverness. After the most recent event in Inverness, we made a decision with the Highland Council to actually produce a joint plan, just recognising that the strength in taking a partnership approach, but also the fact that we have many shared actions. Plus, it makes it simpler for those we're trying to reach if they just have to try and find one plan rather than navigate looking for multiple ones. So over the next 6 years, we are seeking to move from consultation and engagement with the deaf community to co-production. So recognising that people are experts in their own lives. And as part of that, we have committed to meeting 4 times a year with what we're calling at the moment, it's just a working title, a BSL panel. And that will be made up from members of the deaf community, all BSL users. And the aim of that is to review the plan 4 times a year and to ensure that we are doing what we said we were going to do, and also to pick up on any issues that may arise. And this is something that isn't in the plan but linked to it. We are aware that there are lots of issues to do with how people access our services, so we've also committed to set up a separate group to look at how we can improve that, and that will be aimed again at deaf, deafblind people, or people who have hearing or sight loss. And both of those will be delivered jointly with the Highland Council. So just quickly to highlight some key points from the plan. So we want to continue to look at accessibility, so to increase the amount of BSL content on the website, and also to look at how we can increase awareness and participation. And I think having Verity here is a really good example of that. How can we ensure that people know what is happening at the board meetings if they can't access or read the transcript or the minutes? We're also looking at improving our complaints process to make sure that it's more BSL user friendly. And we're looking at how we understand our community. At the moment, data, as with lots of things across Scotland and within the NHS, it's difficult to understand exactly where people are. So we're working with eHealth to ensure that we know where people are, but also that if someone requires an interpreter, that it's really clear on their health records and that that interpreter is booked 100% of the time. We would also love to see deaf awareness training becoming mandatory for all staff and for the board as well, because it is a really important issue and we want to really improve outcomes and health outcomes for all of our population. And this is an element of the population who haven't had a voice and have been forgotten about many times. And then on a really positive note, we also want to look at how we can celebrate and promote BSL culture in Highland, and also how to highlight deaf role models. So we're working with comms and engagement on that. So just to finish with a quote from Rebecca Mansell, who is the current Chief Executive of the British Deaf Association. Language is at the heart of what it means to be human. To be able to express ourselves, share information and build relationships, every human needs a strong language foundation. Deaf people continue to be deprived of that human right. It is time for this to change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and thank you, Verity. I want to open up to questions and comments, but I just wanted to start by saying I really welcome this coming through to the board and helping to raise awareness of this. I'm so pleased to hear you say that there's been good uptake of those classes, because that was going to be one of my questions. Because it was something I didn't know that we did, and it's great to hear that people are using that. And maybe not for today, but maybe sometime in the future, it would be really good to understand what kind of numbers we're talking about. You said there was like a waiting list, so it'd be good to understand kind of actually how many people we're able to support in learning BSL. And I suppose then trying to be quite practical about it, once we've trained somebody and they've passed, are we able to utilize that skill within the organization, or you know, given what you were saying about access to support, is that something we can do? Do we know how many people in the organization are trained and passed? Can we easily identify them? And I suppose how do we harness that? But Louise, you've got your hand up, so maybe Louise wants to come in, or Naomi, then Louise, I don't mind.
Thanks. It's a follow-on from that, really, Sarah, in terms of whether we are consciously deciding who needs to go, as well as it being people that have got an interest. Because I think certainly if you think about it, for example, in ED, that might be a really important place for us to target people coming in a distressed state, in a difficult position. Are we actually looking at the right places, or are we just making it happenstance for who is interested? And that's not a criticism. It may be something that we've not really picked up on sufficiently to target who we really think needs to be doing the training, and then having that record of who's done what level, so that we can get people in as well as interpreters.
Thanks, Louise. Naomi, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure, I can come in. So I don't have the numbers for the number of people who are on the waiting list or who have completed it, but I can get that. But I do know that, having spoken to Amanda Wilson from Deaf Services, who runs it, that they're actually increasing the number of classes they're going to deliver. I think it's pretty much every week of the year. apart from obviously summer and maybe Christmas, they deliver the classes. So I would say that it is more of an introduction to BSL. You do get a qualification at the end of it, but that doesn't mean that you're a qualified BSL interpreter. So the training to become a fully qualified interpreter, if you haven't had a background in it, so if you haven't been raised in a deaf family, is on average 6 years. So it costs a lot of money. We're talking tens of thousands to train someone, and obviously takes an awful lot of time. And there is a real shortage of interpreters in Highland. We're very fortunate that we have an excellent programme at Dingwall Academy. It's where the Deaf Education Unit is based, but they actually have British Sign Language as one of the core languages. So they have had a lot of pupils who have gone through to, and they're now studying it at degree level in Edinburgh. The trick has, or the challenge has been trying to encourage them to come back to Highland. As we know, a lot of people when they move away tend to stay away and then only come back when they have a family. In terms of Louise's question very quickly about how we identify who it's best for, there is actually a training matrix, so that as far as I know, that's available to all of the different teams so they can see which level is most appropriate for staff. But I do think, as the example of Dingwall Academy, normalising it, making sure that everybody has that from childhood, that ability to communicate, I think is great. So if we could open it up to more patient-facing staff, I think it could only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And I didn't know that about Dingwall Academy. What a phenomenal resource. And you're right, if there's a way that we can tap into that and bring people back at some point, that would be amazing. But what a fantastic thing to have. Okay, I've got a couple of other questions. I've got Garrett next, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do we have any translator sign language people, you know, for foreign people doing foreign sign languages?
Off the top of my head, I don't think we do. We do struggle to get people who can interpret into British Sign Language. I can look into it though, because we do have contracts with Language Line and Global Language Line. So it may be that if in that rare occurrence there was someone who spoke a different form of sign language, because it is unique in each country, that we might be able to access that. But as far as I know, we haven't had that requirement, but obviously you never know. So.
It's a good question. Thank you. Alex, please.
Thanks, sir. And thanks for that, Naomi. This is excellent. I must admit, I wasn't aware of it, but now that I am, I'm very pleased to see it. Reading the paper, one of the things that comes through is there was learning taken from the 2018 to 2024 plan, which is good to see. But the bit that bothers me is some of the commitments were carried across, so they are now in the 24 to 30. But were some of the actions also carried across? So is there an action tracker that goes with this? Because when you read it, there's an action plan, but there's no timescales involved, apart from it's a 6-year period. Do you have an action tracker that is used, and therefore you allocate timescales to the actions we've got, particularly, and I'm obviously interested in particular for the NHS Highland actions? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and that was one of the things that we were very conscious of in developing this plan. So I've just started this work in mid-June, and certainly that is something that we're working on now with the Highland Council, because we've decided to go down the joint plan route. So we are going to be meeting with them on a regular basis. We've already started to pull together across that action tracker. But I think the point about moving from consultation and engagement with the deaf community to co-production is really important, because we want there to be ownership, so that's certainly not something that we're going to dictate, but rather to be led by people as we build on that relationship. So the intention of meeting at least 4 times a year is to build on that. So to ask, what are the priorities, what issues have arisen that we need to address now, and to try and be a lot more responsive, and to work in partnership rather than just always saying, this is what we feel you need. So, but absolutely, we do need to make sure that we're accountable and things are measurable, and we do what we say we're going to do.
Thank you, Naomi. And Anne, please.
Thanks, Sarah. So likewise, obviously, it's very pleasing to have the report here and to have our item being interpreted. So, and it's also understandable and absolutely right that the focus of the plan is largely on service delivery. I was interested that there's quite a lot in here about the democratic process, but not so much about the governance processes of other services that people are receiving, like our own. I just wondered if there was, throughout the engagement that's been done around the plan, any interest in being able to engage more with the board itself and its committees in any shape or form. You know, I'm sure that's not people's top priority by any means, but you know, it just struck me, and I wondered, Sarah, whether there might be any value in exploring what information we make available in an accessible format for this community about our annual review as a first step along that sort of journey. Thanks.
Absolutely, Anne. I'll see others might want to come in, but yes, as we've been thinking about this, I've been considering how else we might support as a board to raise awareness and to align with the plan. So yes, I think that's a really good suggestion, and we can take that away and have a look at that. Okay, I don't know, Naomi, if you wanted to come in with any other comments.
Just to respond to Anne, it is actually something, Anne, that certainly one gentleman in July at the engagement event came up and spoke to us about, specifically about the board meetings, and asked why we couldn't have them signed. So I think it's one of those things we need to plan for and do in step, because it would require a minimum of 2 interpreters, and that's quite a long thing for someone to watch. It might slow down your meetings if someone is to interpret, but we've certainly been in discussions with Ruth around how we could make it more accessible, and perhaps that's, I don't know how you'd feel, Sarah, if they've spoken to you about it, but you know, maybe doing a summary after the board meeting, and then that could be signed, and certainly looking at turning on the transcription. So, but it is something that we're very conscious of.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Yeah, I was wondering, as you were speaking there, I had the same thought, because I try and do a little video summary of the board meetings after every board, and then it's maybe something we could start with that and then build up to. Gareth, you've got your hand up there. I'll bring you in.
Just to say, I think we need to be thoughtful about this is an important aspect of diversity inclusion, and be able to provide things in different formats. So one thing I think is being able to attend public meetings and what we provide, and also how we provide a way of gathering information about who's going to attend and what support they might require. So that's an important part of it, so we can actually secure interpretation services if required. And I suppose that comes to the second point that's going to make, is we need to be thoughtful about that across all languages, including British Sign Language. So and I think we also need to think about how we promote translation services for documents that we then produce, or minutes, for example. So that's all part and parcel of the process, I think.
Thanks, Gareth. And I had also in my notes made the connection between the work I know that we're going to be looking at more broadly around equality, diversion and inclusivity, and how this obviously has strong links with that, and we can pick that up through that work as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. I think it's fair to say we're all very welcoming of this report, and as you can hear, you've got us thinking about how we can further support and promote this, and we'll take that away and do some work on it. But just a huge thank you, Tim, Naomi, Verity, of course, and all the other people who I know will be working on this in the background. It's really, really good to see. And I look forward to bringing it back again in the future. And it'd be great to see how it's developing and what else we can do to support it. Colleagues, just to recap, we were being asked to review and endorse the proposed British Sign Language plan and take moderate assurance from what we've seen. Is everybody happy with that? Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Verity. Okay, that takes us to item number 12. So this is our Highland Charter for Climate, Nature and Health. I'll hand over to Richard to introduce this, but I think we've got Dan with us as well. But Richard, I'll hand over to you first of all, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so we've got a paper here today to ask the board to endorse NHS Highland becoming a formal signatory to the Highland Charter for Climate, Nature and Health. Dan Jenkins from Health Improvement and his team, they've done all the legwork on this. So we will pass over to Dan to take us through the paper, and then we'll be able to answer any questions afterwards.
Perfect.
Thank you, Richard. I will just share my screen so folk can see it. So, yeah, thank you. This is an item that was previously discussed at the Finance, Resource and Performance Committee and represents an opportunity for NHS Highland as a board to formally sign up to the Highland Charter for Climate, Nature and Health. So this is an initiative, partnership initiative between the Highland Green Health Partnership, Highland Adapts and Highland Environment Forum and the Highlands Islands Climate Hub, and kind of represents an opportunity to really kind of put front and centre the action as well as the need to develop a resilient and inclusive environment that supports biodiversity and climate emergency as well as health and well-being. What I'll do is the easiest way to do it is show you a couple of pages straight from their website so you know exactly what the public are seeing about this and exactly what we would be saying we're getting involved in. So the charter itself is that pledge to put climate, nature and the benefits of green and blue health at the centre of decision making and action so that that natural environment and people have improved health, improved well-being and improved resilience. It very much builds on the previous climate charter. Highlands Islands Climate Hub for the last few years had a climate charter, but it's bringing those three elements together that are really essential for well-being of people on the planet, and the synergy between climate, nature and health is really, really stark. An interesting anecdote from Joan Laurie, who's the heads up the Highlands Islands Climate Hub, is that when she was out and talking to people in community about climate, really what people talked to her back about was nature and health. So it's really clear that there's an enormous amount of synergy between those, and we want to bring those together in our thinking. So when organisations or individuals sign up to the charter, it's about committing to take at least one action that is positive for climate, nature and health, but also to report back each year. So the charter kind of admin will kind of be in touch with people just to check out how that's doing, how people are meeting that commitment, so that there's that reportability, there's that evidence, there's that momentum that we can build in terms of a movement to take this forward as far as possible. So another just page from the website, so it's about acknowledging that nature really does contribute to our well-being and our quality of life. It shapes our cultural heritage and our landscapes, and the pressures on that natural environment from climate change, from biodiversity loss, they're a significant threat to our health because they damage the systems that protect our well-being. These same systems that are obviously of very keen interest to us within NHS Highland. And by signing it, if we did do, it's about making a commitment to making Highland this region where organisations, businesses, public bodies and third sector planning and priority making organisations are fully engaged to making that just transition towards net zero, supporting that climate ready Scotland. So following the already existing climate emergency declarations that we all know well. It's about having a specific responsibility to care for that natural environment and recognising and acting on that so that the habitats, the ecosystems, the biodiversity within our sites and within our gift to maintain are diverse, they're thriving and they're resilient, and also that natural environment is very much valued as an essential aspect of people's health and well-being. It's an opportunity for people, for individuals and communities to connect, enjoy nature and gain those health benefits from that. Okay, so that's what the aim of the pledge is. That's the aim of the commitments that signatories take, and the ask is that for everybody signing that charter is they pledge to take one action that will keep Highland in that good health, and report back on how we're doing it. So in terms of NHS Highland, obviously as an organisation, the scale of our reach, of our influence and our support for regional health is enormous. And we are already part of kind of that kind of movement, if you like, because of the NHS Scotland's climate emergency sustainability strategy, which we're already kind of signed up for. NHS Highland is already kind of key and a leading partner in the Highland Green Health Partnership. We have hosted the post of a development office for the last few years and very much kind of leading in the development of green and blue health, both preventative health, but also positioning it in terms of specific social prescribing work and having some aspects of kind of nature and green and blue health being alternatives or complements to things like pharmaceutical prescriptions. So we're very much embedded in that work. There's already a whole range of initiatives around sustainability that are happening from the board, or the work that Richard and the environment and energy, environment and sustainability team do already, some of which Richard spoke about in his vlog on Thursday. But there's a whole series of plans around improving our outcomes in terms of sustainability and also in terms of preventative health, the work of the health improvement team and public health about making those connections to climate, nature and health that really kind of supports our population to be as resilient as possible. And there's also a real significant impact in terms of increasing staff motivation and value in the work that our staff do. We know that we've got many of our staff hold a real kind of passion for the environment, a passion for sustainability. They try really hard to go about their day-to-day work in a way that is environmentally sound, creates sustainable outcomes and also uses sustainable methods. And for us as an organisation and as a board to sign up to this, I think really values and recognises and validates that work that our staff are doing at an individual level and really helps increase people's motivation there. In terms of what it means and what the implications are, well, the commitments we have are already in place. We have existing obligations around the sustainability agenda, and these come through. We're already committed to those outcomes that were in the NHS Scotland's climate and emergency sustainability strategy. So this is effectively our pledge. It's putting out there that we commit to undertake those obligations and to produce those kind of sustainability goals that we're already kind of signed up to in that way. So because there's no additional financial commitment on top of what we're already doing as a board and as an organisation, and through Richard's team, through the environment, the energy, environment and sustainability team, we already have the governance structures to be able to kind of track those work, to risk assess at each individual case whenever there's a new bit of work or new project going forward. So the process is already there for that. And obviously there's a very strong, significant, positive kind of reputation and communication opportunities of NHS Highland seen to do this. We know that there's several other leading organisations have done some really good press work when they've signed up to this charter, and I think there's a really good opportunity for NHS Highland to do that as well. So hopefully that, along with the short paper that you received, has set out quite clearly what we're kind of asking for, what the benefits are. I believe it's been described as a no-brainer, but I'll let the rest of you decide that. And please do ask me any questions to follow up on that presentation.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's great. And I know that I was at our FRP committee when this was discussed, and it had support from the committee members when you presented it then, which was very good. And I can see that Gaynor has her hand up, so I'll bring Gaynor in, please.
Hi, thank you, Dan. Thanks, Richard. So Richard and I are both on the Environment Sustainability Board for NHS Highland, and I sit as the non-exec champion until the end of this month, and Richard is the executive lead. So this is really great to see. This is something we've been talking about, how we're going to meet the commitments and doing, more importantly, things to meet those commitments in the climate emergency and sustainability strategy for NHS boards in Scotland. And it's just good to see that the wording slightly changed. So I think we're adopting that strategy and then coming out with our own action plan in order to set out how we as a board would be able to deliver those, because obviously for us as a board with a huge land mass, some of those are going to be slightly more tricky than others. So for example, just to kind of illustrate that point, it would be more difficult for us than other boards to electrify our whole vehicle fleet, for example. However, we have fantastic green space and use our green space in very creative ways across the NHS Highland boards, so both in Argyll and Bute and in the Highland region. And so for us, a lot of the targets around green space and biodiversity are certainly things that would be much more within our reach. So really pleased to see this. I was at the launch of, or the relaunch of the Charter in the summer on behalf of the board, and really nice to see that that's come here. And I think, as Dan said, it is a bit of a no-brainer. We're already doing a whole load of fantastic stuff towards those outcomes in the climate emergency and sustainability strategy. So for us, it really should be embedded in everything that we're doing as a board, and it certainly is from what I've seen so far, and that's driven in a lot of places actually from the ground up, which makes it even better, because if our staff are really motivated and involved at that ground up level, I think things work a lot better. So thanks for bringing this down, Richard.
You're welcome. I think just as an added coincidence, you'll all probably also be aware it's Climate Week, Scottish Climate Week just now, just about to start, and so it feels really kind of positive in that way too. Sorry, Evan.
Thanks, hi Dan. Yeah, it's great to see this work and really supportive of it. I've just had a look at the Highland Green Health Partnership, and I do note that Argyll and Bute Council aren't part of that partnership. So I wonder if we could pick up a conversation offline as to how we kind of spread that across the whole board area. The likelihood is there is a separate agenda and infrastructure down there, but I think ensuring that we're working with both partners from particularly an estates and infrastructure perspective, I think would be really positive. So it'd be great to pick that up with you offline.
Yeah, absolutely. When the Highland Green Health Partnership was first set up, it was done on a kind of regional basis. That was some decision with Nature Scott, who were kind of leading on those bits of work, and they specifically chose the Highland kind of council area. Some of the other boards were also split down on that. For example, in Ayrshire, it's just North Ayrshire that were Green Health Partnership, and in Dundee, it was just Dundee City. So there was a bit of a kind of a number of different kind of forms of Green Health Partnership, but in terms of this as working as a board, again, absolutely valid across our entire organisation. So thank you for that point.
Thank you. And we've got some other hands up, so I'll bring Boyd in next, please.
Thanks for the presentation, Dan. I guess there's a great deal of interest from our staff in the organisation in this area, and it's an interest both in work and out of work. It's something that they're committed to, and I just want to put my hand up to say I'm very aware of clinical workforce. Many of the meetings and conversations I have outside meetings with clinical workforce, they are very committed to this, and so I just wanted the board to note that there is real buy-in, and we have a climate conscious workforce for sure.
Thank you, Boyd. And before I bring others in, while I remember, I think there's something here, isn't there? We've heard a lot about the work that is already underway. We've heard a lot about a very committed and passionate workforce who are kind of, personally aligned to this agenda. But there does seem to be something missing for us, perhaps, about how we close that loop and how we just acknowledge that. And I'm sort of thinking out loud here, and we can take it away and decide how we want to do this. But I wonder if there are some sort of simple steps that we can take which just help us to acknowledge where work is already in place or where work connects with other things that we're doing. And it might be something as simple as adding, one sentence to an S-bar that just highlights how something has considered this work, or how this, how this charter has been considered in the development of something or the delivery of something. So there might just be some kind of simple things that we can do that help close that loop and tie everything together. So I'm happy to take that away myself. Richard, were you coming in on one of the questions?
Yes,
Yep.
I'll maybe just come back on Boyd's. It's just something I was going to say at the end as well. That there is, we've got a really enthusiastic workforce about green schemes, and it's one of the things we noticed when we came in to a couple of years ago and started to strengthen the environmental sustainability team. The amount of work that was going on in isolation, and it didn't really have a home to come in for support or to tie into the wider picture. So it's something we've done over the last 2 years, is start to have these subgroups having the chairs having a place on the environmental sustainability committee, and for them to report into them and to produce an annual report, and to have the support of that team when required as well. So there's still a lot more to do, but it's something we started to do, is to formalise a lot of these pieces of work that go on round about the board area, and there's a lot of clinical work ongoing as well that's national, and that we don't know about until we hear about it from another source, and it's really good to capture that. But there's a real enthusiasm for the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, were you coming in on that as well, or was it something different?
That's general point, it can wait.
Okay, great. I will take Muriel next then, please.
Thank you for that, Dan. I think it's all been said before, but the work and the gains that have been done internally and externally are just amazing, and it's been going on for many years, and the partnership working is fantastic. However, we do need to link. There are missing links, and following on what Sarah was saying, I think it's important we capture them, because they could be just something relatively simple that could just tease the pathways through, and again the pathways through the multi-organisations from our communities right through. One thing I would be keen to explore in the future and find out how we're linking with some of our areas that are more challenged and don't have the access that we've got. Some of our rural hospitals that are and rural communities that don't necessarily have those links and awareness. I think it'd be quite interesting to know how we're going to pull them in.
Thanks, Muriel. And I don't know, this is either something, Dan, you can pick up just now, or Richard, if you know
Yes,
kind of how we're doing that, or we can bring it back.
Certainly, we've got quite a wide kind of regional reach in the work of the Green Health Partnership. Obviously, from Evan's point, Highland Council area at the moment, but the kind of reaching out to kind of locality-based work and being able to work at that level is something we thread across. It'll help to use things like our community partnership kind of structures. We have representatives from the health improvement public health team in each of those, and there's increasing numbers of our kind of regional areas that are developing things like green health networks and linked environments. So I think you're absolutely right, Muriel. It's about putting these things together and making sure that those structures support each other at that local level.
Very, very sticky mute button. Okay, and Tim, I'll bring you in next, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just a general point I wanted to make really picks up on what a few other people are saying, that we're a bit short on the ground for good news at the moment, and even for climate and nature it seems to be more doom and gloom, but there is a lot of good stuff that's going on within this agenda, both generally and particularly for NHS Highland. And there's a really good track record of work and examples of work that are some of the best in the country, or even much further beyond the country as well. For example, the work that's been done on medication with the green theatres or water stewardship. There's some really fantastic, almost world-leading work there, and a lot of partnership work, for example, in the Cairngorms work that Dan been very involved with in the past, but that's linked with things like transport, social prescribing, and there's lots of developments both for visitors and for residents that will be improving over the next few years. We've got the opportunities to spread that out further. So there are a lot of challenges here and a lot more that we can do, but I think it is one of those things that is a reasonably good news story, and one that can get much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I'll just leave you, I guess, with one thing. Is I'm just posting the link in the chat. I would also recommend that everybody goes and signs up as individuals and make your own individual pledge. Put our names out there and do that on our own personal level as well.
Okay, I didn't realise that was I think something we could do. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Individuals and organisations can sign that pledge and just make their own commitment.
Good. Okay, great. Right. Well, I think I'm going to maybe echo something. Yeah, you're right. It was said at FRP. I think it was Alex that said it. That said this was a no-brainer. So it sounds like we're all aligned to that. And just to remind members, we are being asked to endorse the signing by NHS Highland of the Highland Charter for Climate, Nature and Health, along with the express pledge to fulfil and report on obligations as set out in the NHS Scotland Climate Emergency and Sustainability Strategy. So from the conversation, I feel happy that we are all in agreement, but if I can get some thumbs up just to give me the nod, fantastic. Great. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Richard.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay, so that moves us on now to item number 13. We've got some revisions to a couple of our committee terms of reference, but Ruth, I will invite you just to give us an update on this.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, so this is asking the board to approve some changes to committee terms of reference, and it's predominantly about rerouting the reporting line for the Resilience Committee. That's moving it away from the Audit Committee and over to FRP. So the FRP committee already oversees all our business continuity reporting, which forms part of our overall resilience work. So this is about moving all of that resilience work into the FRP committee and moving it away from audit committee. So those changes have already been considered by those particular committees and have been agreed. And while we were at it, I thought I would also rectify a typo in the Staff Governance Committee terms of reference to reflect the correct name of the People and Culture Portfolio Board. So all of these changes have been considered by the Audit Committee at their last meeting and are being proposed for your agreement at this particular juncture. So it's here for your approval.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. Probably not anticipating too many questions or comments, but I shall pause for a moment in case anybody has anything they want to raise. No? Okay, fantastic. So we're being asked to agree those. And as Ruth said, they've already been through the other routes as well. So we're all happy with that? Great, lovely, okie dokie. And next we have item number 14. So you can see here in the paper, these are the dates for our board and committee meetings, the timetable for 2025 to 2027. They're put in front of us today to agree them. Ruth, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say, but I did just note that we don't have the full suite of IJB dates, unless I've done that wrong. Hang on, let me just get to the right paper.
No, you're quite right. You're quite right. That was one thing I was going to mention. So yes, I have spoken with Charlotte at the IJB before she went away on holiday. And since we're both expecting to be using the established yearly meeting schedules, we're not anticipating any problems at this particular juncture, but I will bring it back in November should there be any significant changes that we need to make once the IJB have already filled out their own timetables. So I will bring it back if there are any changes to be made, but it's here for your agreement at this stage.
Great, so here for agreement, but we'll double check it. And I do wonder, actually, just as a sort of a slight aside, obviously we all have our own memberships and our invitations to the committees which we are members of, and people know this, but just to remind people, they can obviously attend other committee meetings and observe what's going on in those settings as well. I wonder, Ruth, at some point in the future, if it'd be possible to just make one kind of calendar with everything on it so that people can just see, and they might not have an invite in their diary if they're not a member of that committee, but they can maybe see that, for example, FRP are meeting on that Friday, and if they want to dip in or they want to find out more, then they know when it's coming up, and that just might be something we could do in the background to help support members to kind of
So everybody can see everything.
Everybody
Yeah,
can see, yeah.
we have that information, and I can send that out shortly after the meeting for you.
Lovely.
That's no problem.
Okay, that's super. Thank you, Ruth.
Sorry, I'll just correct that. I'll send it out once we've finally agreed them and that there are no clashes. Okay.
When it's really, really done. Okay, good. Any questions or comments about our meeting timetable? No. Okay, so being asked to agree those, obviously, those comments about the bits to be confirmed notwithstanding, but we're happy to agree those just now. Good. And I'll just pause for a moment. Does anybody have any other competent business they wish to raise? No, lovely. So just to confirm, the date and time of our next meeting is the 26th of November at 9:30. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank everybody for their time today. And thank you to all the teams that have pulled together the information for this meeting. Much appreciated. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.